They fired me 5 minutes before asking me to smile on stage about record growth. My name is Caleb Rios. I'm 42, and until an hour before our annual company summit, I'd spent 14 years building the engine that kept Alderwave Technologies alive. 14 years of 70-hour weeks, of vacations that turned into debugging sessions, of holidays spent on folding chairs and server rooms lit like fish tanks. And in a windowless prep room behind the main ballroom of the Atlanta Convention Center, our chief operating officer cleared his throat and told me I was done. "You're being let go effective immediately," Evan Mercer said, reading from a tablet like he was auditioning to play a human. "We're moving into an operational excellence phase. Your role is no longer aligned to the strategic shape of the organization." The applause in the ballroom rolled through the wall like distant surf. 800 employees were finding their seats, blissfully unaware that the person who had written half of the systems they were about to brag about was being marched to the exit. I watched Evan avoid my eyes. He had the posture of a man who believed in bullet points. Fresh MBA, perfect hair, spotless shoes. People like that are invincible until they're not. A security guard leaned in the doorway, pretending not to listen. I could smell the coffee they'd set out for the speakers, could hear the keynote playlist thumping through the drywall. Upbeat, expensive optimism. I thought about the thing I'd built in the hours nobody paid for. I called it Loom, an orchestration layer that braided together client intake, provisioning, billing, and internal project workflow. What took our teams 4 hours of tedious clicking, Loom did in 12 minutes with 0 errors. I'd shown Evan a demo 3 months earlier. He'd smiled, said something about nice side projects, then pushed a contract for a third-party system that cost 10 times as much and did half as little. Now he was telling me my strategic shape didn't fit. "I understand," I said. I said it because there was nothing left to say. If I'd argued, he would have smiled and reminded me it wasn't personal. If I'd asked who would maintain the core billing automation I wrote in 2014, the same one that kept us from cratering when a major client tripled volume with 2 days' notice, he would have gestured at the team. The man had never waited out a 3 a.m. deploy eating vending machine almonds, but he could point at charts. "Security will escort you out," he added. "Access has already been revoked." The guard shifted his weight and gave me the same look people reserve for funerals and traffic accidents. "I'll walk," I said. I carried my box down the service corridor past racks of folding chairs and crates of stage lights. At the corner, the corridor opened into the back of the ballroom. The LED wall washed the room in a corporate sunrise. The CEO, Porter Lang, was about to take the stage. Porter of the tailored blue suits and empty metaphors. Porter who'd inherited Alderwave from his father and treated it like a yacht he didn't know how to steer. On impulse, I slid into an empty seat in the back row. The guard hesitated, then let me ghost into the darkness. "Tonight," Porter boomed, "we celebrate a new era of efficiency." My phone buzzed. A name lit the lock screen and tightened everything in me at once. Amara Sethi. People like Evan introduced themselves with degrees. People like Porter introduced themselves with last names. Amara didn't introduce herself. She didn't have to. She ran Acacia Ridge Partners, an investment firm that quietly owned large pieces of companies like ours and loudly removed the ones that lied to them. She was the only board member who asked me real questions in engineering reviews, who always wanted to see the logs, not the slides. Her text was blunt. "You got cut?" I typed back, 5 minutes ago. Her reply landed before I could pocket the phone. "I have a table in the Omni lobby. 10 minutes. And then, let's make sure Porter remembers your name for a very long time." Porter was on stage now, gliding from efficiency to excellence, from leaner to faster. His teeth reflected the stage lights like a lens. They'd spent $200,000 on this summit. The screens, the orchids, the flame-proof optimism. It finally clicked why they'd wanted me out before the lights came up. It kept the narrative tidy. I stood, set my box down for a moment, and walked alone down an aisle of gray carpet into the brighter light of the lobby. The applause followed me out like weather. The Omni Hotel connected to the convention center through a glass corridor that framed the city like a movie. September in Atlanta carries heat into the evenings, the kind that lays on your skin like a warm hand. The world outside moved, cabs, bikes, couples, but inside that carpeted corridor, time felt staged. Amara had chosen a table in the far corner of the lobby bar where no one could overhear without trying. She wore a charcoal dress with the kind of clean lines nobody notices until they remember every detail later. Silver hair pulled back, phone face down, a notebook open with 3 lines written in it. When I walked up, she didn't greet me like a savior or a subordinate. She nodded like we were starting a meeting we both knew would matter. "They told you it's about efficiency," she said. "They always do," I said, taking a seat. "They also told me, in a board meeting last week, that the proprietary automation that underpins our valuation was written by the team." She let that hang in the air the way good cross-examiners let a witness sit in their own words. "You built Loom, didn't you?" I stared at the condensation beating down her untouched glass of water. "On my own time," I said. "On my own hardware." "Good," she said, as if she'd decided something 2 conversations earlier. "Because Porter is negotiating a sale to Northline Integrations, and the linchpin of that deal is the software you built. They needed you gone before the paperwork asked the wrong questions." I felt the first flare of anger break through the practiced calm the military bakes into you when you've ridden out enough midnight incidents and 5 a.m. postmortems. The anger wasn't loud. It was precise. She didn't say rumored sale or potential. She said negotiating. She didn't say part of the deal. She said linchpin. "How do you know?" I asked. She slid her notebook across the table. The page held a neat list of dates, dollar amounts, and 4 names I knew too well. At the bottom, a printed email, folded once. I recognized the thread header before I read the first line. Porter. Lang at Alderwave, Evan. Mercer at Jeffrey. Keen at our general counsel, and Marla. Fredericks at Northlinient. Com. Porter's words were underlined in careful pencil. Need clean assignment across all automation IP before close. Mercer will handle termination to reduce exposure. There was a second email in the chain, from Evan. Terminating CR pre-announcement mitigates claim risk. Legal drafting broad assignment doc re. All overlapping personal projects. I hadn't realized I was gripping the table until I saw the impressions my fingers left in the condensation ring from the water glass. "They planned it," I said quietly. "They planned all of it. They're not subtle," she said. "And they think you won't be either. They think you'll rage on the internet, sign something you shouldn't, or go quietly and update your resume. I am asking you to do none of those things." She reached into her bag and set a thin folder between us. "I want you to build Loom properly, outside of Alderwave, with funding, with a team, and with protection. And I want to invest." The folder was light, but the numbers inside had gravity. A seed investment that would have taken me 10 lifetimes of saving to assemble, a clean corporate structure, a list of law firms, and 2 names circled. One of them I recognized from an article about a unicorn exit that had been neither accidental nor gentle. "You want to go to war?" I said. She smiled for the first time. It didn't reach her eyes. "I want the truth to win in the market. If that looks like war to people who lie on balance sheets, so be it." 3 days later, Alderwave's attorney called. "Caleb, this is Jeffrey Keen, Alderwave's general counsel. Congratulations on your years of service," he said, as if the words weighed nothing. "We just need to tidy up a few items around your departure." "Tidy," I said, tasting the word. "Standard separation," he continued, "and a narrow intellectual property assignment to ensure clarity around your work product." "Narrow," I said. They scheduled the meeting for 9 a.m. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the loop around the building to bleed off the nerves. The lobby smelled like the same tea they brewed on the same kettle since the year Porter learned his name. I signed a visitor log like a stranger and rode the elevator to a floor I used to open with my badge without thinking. Jeffrey waited in the glass conference room with Evan and 2 people I'd never seen. The woman wore a blue suit and eyes like polished metal. The man wore a smile he'd bought. "Marla Fredericks and Andrew Lee," Jeffrey said. "Northline Integrations." "Hello, Caleb," Marla said. "We've heard a lot about your work." She said it like a compliment and a warning at once. Jeffrey slid a stapled packet across the table. The thickness of paperwork that says, "Don't read this," with the weight of paper alone. I flipped through. It wasn't narrow. It was a net. All automation-related concepts, prototypes, or software you developed, conceived, or reduced to practice during your employment, and for a period of 24 months thereafter, including but not limited to any work that may be seen as competitive with Alderwave's current or future offerings. 2 years. Future offerings. Concepts. The language wasn't a guardrail. It was a minefield. What happens if I don't sign? I asked. Jeffrey steepled his fingers. Evan checked his watch like tension was beneath him. Marla watched me like she measured people the way she measured risk. Then we would need to seek injunctive relief, Jeffrey said pleasantly, to prevent you from using or disclosing our trade secrets. You mean any knowledge in my head? I said. Everything from 14 years. Let's not make this adversarial, Jeffrey offered, as if we were two strangers debating appetizers. It's just clarity. Then give me clarity, I said, sliding the packet back to him. And a pen that doesn't leak. He blinked. You'll sign now. I'll take it to my attorney, I said. I watched the relief return to Jeffrey's expression, watched the frown tighten Evan's jaw. Marla didn't flinch. Andrew wrote something down that meant nothing to anyone but him. They'd expected a cornered animal. They got a man with a calendar. On the sidewalk outside, I called the number circled in Amara's folder. This is Dev Patel, the voice said. You could hear the train of thought behind it. Amara said you'd call. I have a packet I'm not supposed to sign, I said. And a company I'm not supposed to build. Bring both, he said. And a laptop. Dev's office was a rectangle of light on the 23rd floor with a view that taught you how to count money by counting roofs. He read the assignment language twice, once with a pen, once with a frown. They wrote this to scare you out of existing, he said. Which means they're scared of you existing. He leaned back. What do you have that they don't? I opened my laptop and walked him through Loom. Core orchestrations, the rules engine that resolved contradictory requests without human intervention, the provisioning mapper that translated human promises into API calls, the billing reconcilers that turned spaghetti into clean lines. I showed him the commit history, timestamps tied to my personal Git, the hardware purchase receipts, the emails to myself at 1:13 a.m. Full of exclamation points only another builder understands. You built this with your brain and your electricity, Dev said quietly. Good. Keep every receipt. Make a backup that you lock in a box. Now tell me the part you haven't told me yet. I told him about Amar's email, about Porter's words in black ink, about Evans mitigates claim risk, about Northline's eyes on my code base like it belonged to a future they'd already spent. Dev nodded. Litigation is a stick. We'll keep it on the table, but you're faster with a keyboard than a complaint. So we move. We formed a company in 9 hours, papers e-filed, signatures on screens that felt like portals into a life that didn't exist yesterday. We called it Loombridge Labs because I couldn't bear to let them steal the word that had gotten me through 2 years of nights. Amara wired the seed investment the next morning. It hit my new corporate account like a pulse. I stared at the number for too long. It looked like someone else's life. We found a raw space in a brick building in Old Fourth Ward that used to be a factory for something that came in boxes. The floor still remembered the weight. We dragged folding tables in, borrowed whiteboards, bought a coffee machine we didn't know how to program, and put up a paper sign with our name written badly on it. Day 1, there were 4 of us. Me, an engineer named June I'd worked with for years who could make compilers sing, a DevOps lead named Ao who didn't panic when servers lied to him, and a product manager named Danny who could extract requirements from human beings like a magician pulls scarves from sleeves. The first 20 days felt like a time lapse of a building going up. We wrote code until our wrists and eyes reminded us they were attached to humans. We built out the rules engine, then tore it back down and rewired the precedence tree so it could justify every decision to an auditor without forcing them to speak in code. We designed a console that a frightened project coordinator could actually live in. We blocked off an hour every afternoon for a walk around the block and pretended it was culture. Amara stayed out of the code and in every other trench. She sent emails that turned into calls that turned into meetings that turned into pilot programs. She didn't sell vapor. She told the truth. We were small, but we were fast. We didn't have a glossy brochure, but we would answer the phone at 11 p.m. Our UI still had ugly corners, but our orchestration would do in minutes what competitors took hours to click through. Our first pilot was with a regional consulting firm called Quarry and Fun. They tried, like everyone else, to stitch together 3 systems with duct tape and late nights. Their operations director, a woman named Lila who spoke like every sentence had cost her 3 others, laid down her conditions. Don't crash, she said. Don't lie. And if you do those first two, make me a dashboard I can hand to my CFO. We didn't crash. We didn't lie. We delivered a dashboard that didn't require translation. Their client intake time dropped from a business day to a lunch break, and Lila sent me a text I still have pinned. I can breathe. One pilot turned into 3. Amara refused to let us grow sloppy on the back of early wins. She walked us into rooms with people who weren't impressed by metaphors or enthusiasm. When they asked for references, we sent them Lila's number. When they asked for security reviews, AO opened the locks and let them look as long as they wanted. 2 months in, the Atlanta Business Chronicle ran a short piece that didn't say our name, but said enough. Emerging automation startup lands trio of pilots, former Alderwave engineer among founders. It wasn't a shot. It was a flare. The next day, I got a call from a number I still knew by heart. Caleb. The voice was a whisper of someone who wasn't supposed to be calling. It's Mia. Mia had sat 2 rows from me for 5 years in the engineering pit that smelled like cold pizza and dry erase markers. She had spent half her career translating client demands into something our machinery could survive. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, she said, rushing before she could lose her nerve. But Northline came in for a technical diligence session yesterday. And they brought 4 people. 2 of them tried to be nice. The other 2 wrote our systems like a bad neighborhood. The client intake tool Porter bragged about? It threw a fatal error when they tried to onboard a test client with custom billing rules. Twice. The project workflow engine Evan keeps calling battle-tested. It's missing half the features Northline considers basic. What did Porter do? What he does. He smiled. Then he yelled at us after they left. He asked why we weren't further along. Half the team he fired is who used to push us further along. The rest of us are treading water. They want a miracle. We're harvesting buckets. Thank you, I said. Be careful. Caleb, she said before hanging up. What you built. It was the only thing here that felt like the future. I hope you get to build it without people like him standing behind you with a stopwatch. 2 weeks later, an email with no greeting hit my inbox at 6:14 a.m. From Porter. Lang at Alderwave 2. Board at Alderwave. C-suite at Alderwave subject. Northline term sheet withdrawn. The line that mattered was the second. They cited deficiencies in our automation capabilities and the emergence of an external competitor offering comparable solutions. He'd never say our name. He didn't need to. By January, Loombridge had 12 paying customers and a monthly recurring revenue number that made the seed round look like a down payment. We hired 3 more engineers, then 2 more, then a support lead named Arjun who had made a career out of talking panicked people off ledges and hanging up before they realized they'd taken his hand. We didn't move fast and break things. We moved fast and didn't break them. When something cracked, we stopped and fixed the weld. June set up code reviews that felt like kitchen tables, tough and kind at the same time. Danny ran weekly sessions she called truth meetings, where the only rule was, show what hurts. We didn't build a culture deck. We built a culture and let visitors write about it later if they needed something for LinkedIn. In February, we got our first Fortune 100 logo. It didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like a heavy door opening because someone inside had finally found the right keyhole. Their head of operations said what every big client says when they choose small. We don't want to be your biggest customer. We want to be your favorite. We built them a custom policy engine that let their non-technical teams write plain language rules that compiled to code we could trust. Every time they shipped a new rule without opening a ticket, their director of something or other sent me a little emoji that looked like a rocket if you squinted. I printed the first one and taped it to the wall because my childhood didn't include that kind of encouragement and I didn't know what else to do with it. The story that burned the last bridge came out on a Tuesday morning. Alderwave deal collapses. Startup led by former engineer wins clients on performance, not hype. The piece quoted anonymous sources at Northline who said things you don't often see people say in public. We expected a mature automation platform. We found legacy scaffolding and PowerPoints. It quoted Lila, who didn't care about being anonymous. They asked me to submit tickets, she said. Caleb answered his phone. It quoted an analyst who was trying to be neutral. We are seeing a shift away from cost-cutting theater toward measurable service gains in this category. At 9:03 a.m., my phone lit up with a number labeled Evan Mercer. It's Evan, he said, as if caller ID were fiction. We should talk. I'm listening. This back and forth between our companies, it's not healthy. Perhaps we can find a way to work in parallel. You're calling to ask me not to compete, I said. I'm calling to explore collaboration. You fired me before you announced that the thing I built was the thing you'd sell, I said. Your general counsel slid me a packet that asked me to sign away my future. You don't get to call it collaboration when your market strategy collapses. He exhaled into the phone. You're being emotional. No, I said. I'm being accurate. A long, careful silence. We would consider acquiring your company, he said, like he was offering me rent. I looked through the glass at our 12 engineers, at AO with his headphones around his neck explaining to Arjun why this outage would not go the way the last one had at his old company. At June pointing at a diagram twice with a capped marker because she refused to let her fingers do the talking. At Danny teaching our favorite client how to use a new feature like she was teaching a friend a recipe. No, I said. You would consider acquiring your conscience. We already have one. He hung up. I let the quiet fill the room. And for the first time since the prep room behind the ballroom, I let myself breathe all the way down. Alderwave didn't announce layoffs. They sent out a restructuring memo. People like Porter never call it what it is because if they did, they'd have to stop wearing white shirts. Word leaked to the press anyway. 40% gone. 2 floors subleased. The flame-proof optimism burned through its funding. Porter stepped down. Evan told someone who told someone that he was exploring opportunities. We threw no party. We were too tired and too aware that those 40% weren't line items. They were Mia and the guy who had always brought in tamales on Fridays and the 27-year-old who hadn't saved enough for the first layoff, let alone the second. I donated the speaking fee from an operations conference to a fund a few old Alderwave folks set up to help colleagues bridge rent. I didn't post about it. The only people who needed to know knew. By spring, Loombridge had grown beyond a single room and 2 folding tables. We took the floor above ours and forgot to buy real chairs for a month. A recruiter sent me a resume that looked too familiar. Andrew Lee, formerly Northline. He wrote a 1-sentence cover letter. I prefer builders to buyers. We hired him and didn't make him say anything else. Later, over coffee, he told me he'd never been permitted to ship work he was proud of. You people, he said, motioning at our mess of cables and mismatched cups, ship things you'll argue about at lunch. I want that. In May, a reporter asked me to keynote at the Georgia Tech Systems Summit. The last time I'd stood on a stage that large, I'd been a face in the back row, listening to Porter automate people like me out of his story. The night before the keynote, I stayed too late at the office and wrote and rewrote the first line until it stopped trying to be clever. On stage, the lights were the same color as all corporate lights. I stood behind a piece of furniture that cost more than one of our servers and told the truth. I'm not here because a company did a bad thing, I said. Companies do what they're built to do. I'm here because we had a choice between spending 2 years in court or 2 years building something that could answer a phone at midnight. We chose the phone. After, in the hallway, I saw faces I knew. Some of them had followed Evan's orders for too long and finally ran out of orders to follow. Some had found better companies. Some carried a grief that looked like a long winter, and I recognized it because it had been in my mirror. Mia found me last, wearing a lanyard and a grin that didn't apologize for existing. I'm at Avail Systems now, she said. They let me build things. Our ops director said, what do you need to make this easy? And handed me a budget that had a comma in it. I forgot budgets could have commas. Good, I said. I'll keep building things you can plug into if you want. She hugged me and whispered. They asked me to speak at the panel next hour. I'm going to tell them to call people back instead of sending them the portal link. Do it, I said. We'll build the thing that lets them do both. By summer, 47 companies in 3 states were using Loombridge to do, in hours, what used to drain days. We weren't magic. We were honest. We'd say no to features that made pretty slides and yes to features that made midnight cheaper. We wrote docs that didn't lie and kept them up to date because nothing makes an ops team hate you more than a 30-day-old promise. We answered support emails with the subject line, I'm panicking, before the ones that said enhancement request. And no matter how our roadmap pretended those two were equal, we weren't. Sometimes, when the office emptied out and the hum of the racks turned into a kind of white noise you could lean against, I'd open the folder Dev told me to keep and flip to the printed email with Porter's sentence underlined. Need clean assignment across all automation IP before close. It no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a fossil, evidence that something dumb and dangerous used to live here. We hadn't killed it. We just built something that made it too slow to eat. 2 years after Evan read a script in a windowless room, I was back in a green room. Different conference, same scent of fresh paint and nerves. A junior producer checked my mic and said, "My brother works at a hospital that uses your software and intake now. He gets to have dinner with his kids again." I nodded and swallowed and reminded myself not to cry into a wireless laugh. People always want the moral at the end of stories like this. Is the moral that revenge is best served in public? A journalist asked me once, off the record, leaning forward like we were about to agree. It isn't. The moral isn't even about revenge. It's this: spreadsheets measure cost. People measure value. The bad leaders never learn the difference. They fire a person and expect loyalty to stay in the badge. They sell a promise and forget to count the engineers who make it real. They call it efficiency because that's what a certain kind of investor wants to hear in an elevator. The good leaders learn that the only operational excellence that matters is service that keeps its word when it's boring and when it hurts. They remember every hour they took from the people who trusted them and try to pay it back with software that gives some of those hours to someone else. Porter will tell a different story about me if anyone asks. He'll say I was difficult because builders who won't lie are always difficult in those stories. Evan will have moved on to a new buzzword, a new script, a new room with bad coffee. When I finish whatever talk I've been asked to give and take the badge off, I still walk back to an office that smells like coffee and cardboard and code, where June is drawing a box nobody but her understands yet, where AO is telling a server it cannot misbehave like that and expect to be invited back, where Danny is translating between a human being and a feature request and making both feel smart. We didn't win by taking anything from them. We won by refusing to sign away what we could build. We won by shipping something that didn't lie. We won by answering the phone.